I want to talk a little bit about the power of the parent story to wrap this up and how this influences change and progress. Matt already talked a little bit about this, and Jennifer laid some groundwork on to help not just remind us, because we all in one way or another have interfaced with different systems of care, whether it's through special education, through a mental health provider, perhaps by getting respite services, maybe by working with the county to get a skills worker in our house or an independent living services or something. So we've all probably had some connection to some kind of system of care that has helped us with our journey with raising our child who has mental health or emotional or behavioral needs. And I myself personally had that experience with a son who had developmental disabilities and mental health needs. And so I understand systems and how they work and don't work and how they don't like to sometimes talk to each other. And I was one of the lucky parents who had a child who fit into either system. And I say that with quotes, lucky, because that was the challenge, was, how to get his particular needs met because of the impact of his complicated disability-related needs. So I really struggled as a parent in trying to figure out how to tell my story and where I should tell it and what was important about my story to share or to tell. So let's talk about the power of the parent's story and how that influences change. Telling your story is foundational skill in systems advocacy. But before you start sharing your story, you need to think critically about who should hear it. As a parent, I sometimes went into meetings, whether they were with the county or with a school, with a lot of irritation about what was happening or frustration about what was happening. And so because I was allowing myself to stay feeling irritated and frustrated and not think about how I could help make that change, and my goal was to let them know how irritated or frustrated I was, it didn't get much change. I don't know if that makes sense to you. But it became kind of a defenses came up, and schools said, we're doing everything we can, and the county said, this is what we're offering, but it's not our fault, it's not working, or we're working hard to find people to come, but we don't have the resources right now, or and so I realized after a couple attempts like that I really wasn't getting the things that I felt my child needed. And so I wanted to think about how else I could ask for that, and how else I could, what kind of person I needed to share that information with, and what I needed to say rather than coming in with what wasn't working. Did I need to come in with what does work, and how can we fit that into what we have available, and maybe challenge the system that way to expand. So think real critically about who needs to hear your story. The second thing I think is important is who makes decisions in the systems you're wanting to impact or share your information with. Who makes the decisions? So if your child isn't getting the support they needed, or you're feeling they're not making the progress they needed to make or should be making, who is it important for you to share that information with? If you call your child's case manager and say, my child is coming home complaining every day about X, Y, and Z, is that the person you should share your story with? Or is it important to maybe call the teacher that they're having conflict with? When my son lived in my home for the first 25 years of his life, we lived about 4 blocks from our state senator. And I decided one of the things that we taught our son to do was part of his job to live in our home was to help take care of our dog. He was responsible for feeding and walking the dog. We decided early on that we were going to route him past this state senator's home whenever he walked the dog. Now, I don't know how often that senator was actually home or looking out the window, but after about 10 years of walking that dog by his house, I would venture to say that there were a few times he probably saw him. And it wasn't too hard to not recognize that somebody with some differences was walking the dog, because he typically had some kind of costuming on. For my son to be able to go out in public and feel safe, he would maybe put on something like, forgive me, Vikings fans, especially right now, a cheese head. Or he would put on his sheriff vest, you know, that had the little star emblem on it that he loved, that he would somehow uncover from an old toy box. Or find, you know, an old hat or a Superman cloak or something like that to wear. So it wasn't always, but it was often enough. And our immediate neighbors knew him, didn't feel least bit threatened by him, understood him. He didn't act weird. He just had a persona about him. So I know he was recognized. And I can tell you why I know, because in our 4th of July parade, our state senator came over and shook his hand. So, you know, when you think about some little connections you make along the way and how important they could be, because later down the line, when some issues came up that I felt very strongly about regarding systems support for my son, and some other things that I knew that he would need down the line, and I felt very strongly about supporting, I was able to make connection with him and say, you know, introduce who I was, whose mother I was, and remind him of that, and then get his attention. This legislator moved from being very focused on roads and bridges and infrastructure to being focused on health and human services. And I'd like to think it was in part because of some of the work that we did just as a neighbor, trying to make a difference. So think about it. You do really make a difference, and the potential is always there. Personal stories are powerful, but personal stories can also get us really bogged down. And Matt also kind of alluded to this about sharing stories, but I want to share with you just a personal experience I had. I was asked at one point early on, before I started working at PACER, to share my story at a state committee hearing. And I was not sure what to expect. I had never attended one of those hearings before. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew my son's story was unique and would probably hold their attention. I also knew that what happened to him would trigger some emotions and probably be remembered because it was a very unusual situation. But I didn't want to influence them because they would feel sorry about what happened to him. What I wanted to do was really to help them understand that I had a functional human being who wanted to have a life as complete and as successful as his siblings. His goals were the same as his siblings: to move out of my house, yay. To be as self-sufficient as possible, yay. To be able to get along and around his community independently as possible, yay. Right? And all of these things that for a child with developmental disabilities and mental health challenges will be huge mountains to climb. But I knew that with the right kinds of supports and services and interventions and help along the way, I thought he could reach, you know, some of those milestones. So I remember putting together my story, and I'll talk in a second about how that happens. But I remember putting together my story. I was kind of coached on how to do it, and keep it short, keep it simple, keep it concise, and that's all they'll have time for. That's what I was assured. I want to share my experience with you with what happened. So of course, you know, I'm sweating through all of my clothes. I get called up, I sit at the table, I have the mic in front of me, they're sitting in this big U, you know, and I share my story. I say, thank you very much. I get up to leave, and I hear, just a minute, Mrs. Nelson. And I like, look, you know, deer in the headlights. Would you mind answering some questions? Well, I didn't exactly know what to do. I didn't know if it was allowed or not. Nobody had told me that that might be a possibility, but I thought, oh, I'll try, you know. So I sat down, and for the next 10 minutes, I was asked questions. And I was able to give more information and more specificity about why I thought this bill was so uniquely important. And I just want to share that story because I got up and left, and I remember the person I was with walked out with me and said, that never happens. But it happened. So I don't know if that would ever happen to you, but I do think that once a door is opened, anything can happen. So just think about it and think about how, you know, when you can hold attention, trigger those feelings, they become memorable, they become intriguing, and they lead to other ways of thinking about things. And then you can hopefully influence others. So here are some personal story tips. And these are really simple and basic, but they're good to think about when you're kind of putting your story together. So be brief and clear. You're going to have limited time to share your personal story. Most people, frankly, do not hear beyond 5 or 10 minutes, and most people hear less than 5 minutes, frankly. So unless you're really motivated or engaged to hear that topic or that story, you may hear the words, but you may not be processing them in a way that's going to be helpful. People spend between 70 and 80% of their day engaged in some form of communication, and about 55% of their time is dedicated to listening. So we're not good listeners. You know, and I just wanted to remind us of that, because one of the best skills we can develop, even as a parent, is that active listening skill. But we still have to keep in mind that these are people with very busy schedules, and this may be your principal. This may be your child's case manager. This may be the IEP team you're working with. This may be your child's mental health provider. But think about some of this, you know. How much of active listening am I really going to get from them? So think about how to, remember that your time is limited and we want to be brief and clear. Choose one thing to talk about when you're telling your story. This is where our personal stories can get confusing. So we really have to do some planning. What part of this story of my child's life do I need to share that would really impact what's happening here? And it may be a hard choice. But think of one thing, focus on one thing and talk only about that. Keep your sentences short. Research shows that when the average sentence length is 14 words, readers understand more than 90% of what they're reading. At 43 words, comprehension drops to less than 10%. So think about short, succinct sentences. You know, and it's okay to write this out. And it's okay to take notes and bullet points to make sure that you're covering what you need to cover and that you're going to be short and to the point. Studies also show that sentences of 11 words are considered easy to read, while those of 21 words are fairly difficult. So if you're sending an email, if you're sending a note to your legislator, think about the length of your sentences, how many words you're using, how many subjects and nouns and verbs you're using in that sentence in order to get your point across. Use words, not acronyms. You may be familiar with ADHD, PTSD, OCD, IEP, but they may not be. So use the words, don't use the acronyms. And it's okay to put in parentheses, if you're writing something down, what the acronym might be. But initially, if you want to keep, you know, if that will help you condense the rest of your written communication, but never ever just assume that they know what you know. You know, my father was a preacher, and he always had 3 points to his sermon. And I remember saying to him once, Dad, it's so boring. You always have 3 points and that's it. Why don't you ever have 4? Why don't you just have 2? And he said, because you always need a beginning, a middle, and an end. Right? So think about that when you're putting your story together. Start with the beginning. Who are you? Who is your child? In what ways has your child been successful? Then go to the middle. What are your concerns? Define your problem clearly. Give specific examples. And then as you're reaching towards your end, well, what do you think will help? What's your solution? What is your ask? So the thanks and the ask can be that end part. You know, what are you going to ask for? And then who's going to follow up on this? How are you going to resolve this problem? Or do you need more information? Or are you not willing to solve this problem? Is there another place I should go? Another person I should connect with? It's okay if this isn't the right person. This person may look at you with a deer in the headlights look and say, I have nothing to do with this. Then you say, thank you for the information. Do you know who I could go to talk to about this? Or they may say, this isn't what I do. I'm not the decision maker here. Fine, then do you know who might be or who else I'd connect with? Some of us aren't public speakers. We have one advocate who was a very successful advocate for many years here at Pacer Center and recently retired. But she said the last job in the world I wanted was to be speaking in front of people. The very last job in the world I wanted. She said I was shy, was introverted, I wasn't a public speaker. But she said, but then I had children with special needs, and I got like this unbelievable sense of courage and bravery. And I knew that if I didn't speak up, nobody else would. And she started to develop her ability to do speaking, public speaking, in front of her child's IEP team or child's providers, to be able to speak out, to be able to articulate what her kids needed. So there are a couple ways you can do it. Practice in front of a mirror. You know, ask a friend to hear you or you know, a family member. Stay who you are. You know, you've heard Jennifer, you've heard Matt, you've heard me. We all have very different ways of presenting. And, you know, it's okay. You know, present in the way that you feel most comfortable. Try to remain calm. It's hard because it's your story, it's your emotional story, it's your life, it's your child's life. And with us, we carry all of that emotion. And we're not telling for you to leave it outside. We're telling you that is part of who you are, but find ways to remain calm. You know, and if you need to take a drink of water, if you need to just, you know, take a quick second to recover, do it. Stay flexible. You know, when you're telling your story, like I explained to you when I was testifying and was a nervous wreck and did my deal and was told that was all I had to do, and then I was asked questions. I could have said, I'm good, but I knew it was my opportunity. You know, maybe there was more information I could give them, so I had to be flexible. I had to believe in myself that I could do it. Sometimes finding a supportive person to go with you. How many of you have been to IEP meetings all by yourself or county meeting all by yourself and just felt like there's nobody there to support you? You know, if you could find a friend, anybody to just go with you and sit there and be with you, that can be helpful. So think about it, what things you need in order to be able to do it. And again, breathe and speak your truth. It's your truth. And you're the only one who knows it, and you have the right to share it. So we just want to wrap up with a little in summary of what we've kind of covered here. Parent leadership includes many different opportunities where you can share your experience and knowledge to contribute to something that will make it better for others. Through your lived experience, and you can take great pride and pleasure in knowing that even though your experience may have been really difficult, it may have really mattered, that you were able to share that and made a difference for someone else. Children's mental health services and systems and supports are a work in progress, and parent leadership provides an important voice and experience to its development. Legislation and policy play another key role in the development of a robust children's mental health system, and your story is important. Our story can help another person better understand, learn just how to support or move into action. So thank you for coming. Please feel free to contact us if you would like more information or resources, if you have questions about upcoming opportunities, and we've provided you with our information.